In this video, we are going to use the direction service of the Google Maps JavaScript API to calculate the route between New York and Toronto. And then we're going to show that on a map like this. Also, we'll be able to calculate the driving distance between these two cities and also the traveling time. Okay, so first, let's create a new file. Let's back up our previous file first and create a new file, and let's call it direction service.php. Okay. Let's open this file using brackets. Let's copy code from the previous file and keep only the code where we created our map. Okay. Okay, let's save this. Let's open the file. Okay, and let's change the map type to road map. Okay, that's better. Also, let's change the title to direction service. Okay, and also we're going to need only one button there. Okay, so let's delete the other two and change the first one to calculate route. Okay. Now we are going to create a function calculate routes, which is going to be called once we click on the calculate routes button. Okay. So on click, we are going to call this function calc route. Okay. So let's define this function. Okay, so first of all, we are going to create a request. So the request is going to send some information to the API, including the origin of our route, the destination of our route, and any other options like the travel mode, and so on. Okay, so we're going to create a variable, call it request. So it's going to be an object where we're going to place a few properties. So we're going to start with the origin of our route. Okay. And let's set that to New York. Okay. And let's have a destination, Toronto. Another property we can use, it's the travel mode. Okay, so if we want to set this to driving, then the syntax is google.maps.travelmode and then driving in capital letters. Okay, there are other modes we can use. We can use walking, bicycling, or transit. Okay. Now our request is ready. So the next step is to pass the request to a function called route. So this function or method is a method of the directions service. Okay, so let's just add a comment here. Pass the request to the route method. Okay, so to use the route method, we need to create a directions service object. So let's do that before the calculate route function. Okay, so we are going to create a direction service object, okay, that we're going to use to use the route method. Okay, and after that we're going to get the result for our request. Okay, so let's create an object and call it directions service. Okay, using the constructor directions service. So we're going to use the keyword new, and then the constructor is google.maps.directions service. So capital D and capital S. Okay, so now we are ready to use that object for the route method. Okay. So the route method is going to take a couple of parameters. So the first one is going to be our request that we have just created there. Okay. The second parameter is a function which will take a couple of parameters. A result parameter, which is going to contain the returned data from the API, and the other parameter is the status, which is going to be also returned by the API. Okay. Now let's do something simple. So we're going to check the status first, and if the status is okay, then we are going to print the result in our console. Okay, so to check the value of the status, we're going to use an if statement. Okay, so to check if the status is okay, we're going to check its value against the following value, which is google.maps.direction or directions status dot okay. So in this case, we are going to log the results in the console. So console.log results. Okay, just having a quick check. The parenthesis that I put there is supposed to be at the end of the route function, right there, and let's have a semicolon. Now let's save our code and refresh the page. Now if we click on the button and then F12, then we can see our results there. So the result we've got here is an object. So let's click on it. So inside this object, we've got a few elements. Okay. So for example, we can see our request. So that's our destination, the origin, and the travel mode as we put in our code. Also, we can have a look at the routes. So for this request, we've got one route returned. Okay, we've got an array of one route. And if we click on that, we've got an object. If we go to the legs, we'll find other bits of information inside another object. Okay, so for example, we can get the distance of our route. Okay, so that's the distance in miles in text format. The value here is the value in meters. Okay, and we can convert that to kilometers in our code if you want to. That's the duration in text format. Okay, and also in seconds. So let's use this set of information to create our alert message, which is going to show the traveling distance in kilometers and also the traveling time. Okay. To make it easy and get straight away the distance in text format as a value in kilometers, we can change one of the properties of the request, which is called the unit system. And we can set that to the metric system rather than the imperial system. Okay, so let's go back to our request and just add another property there, which is unit system. Okay, and to set that to metric, the value is going to be google.maps.unitsystem.metric. Okay, so by default it's imperial, but we want to go for metric for now. Okay, so now if I save and refresh the page, click on the button. Now if you go inside our object, routes, first element, and then legs, first element, the distance this time is going to be in the text format in kilometers. Okay, so let's create our alert message. So let's just write a comment there, get distance and time. Okay, so we're going to alert the traveling distance is, okay, and let's add the value of the distance in text format. So first of all, we are going to use the result object, okay, which is our object there, and then we are accessing the routes array, and we are looking at the first element of the routes array. Okay, and then inside that element we are looking at legs, which is also an array, and we are interested in the first element, which is an object. Okay, index, or the element of index 0, and then inside that element, which is an object, we're looking at the distance property, okay, which is an object, and inside that object we are looking at the text property of that object. All right, and let's carry on. Let's have a dot and then line break, and then the traveling time is, and let's add the value. So for the time we're going to do exactly the same thing, but rather than accessing the distance object, we're going to access the duration object. Okay, and also we're going to use the text format. Okay, and let's add a dot. Okay, Okay, the parenthesis is supposed to be right there. Okay, and that's the traveling distance. Okay, so let's save this and refresh our page. Now if we click on the button, we can see our alerts message. So you can see traveling distance 790 kilometers and the traveling time 7 hours 48 minutes. Okay, now let's print the route on the map like that. So to display the route, we're gonna need a directions display object, okay, which we're gonna create using a constructor. So let's create it there. So create a directions display or renderer object, which we will use to display the routes. Okay, so let's call it directions display, and we're going to use the constructor directions renderer. Okay, so we're going to use a method sets directions of this object to display our route. But before we do that, we need to bind this object to our map. So bind the directions renderer to the map. Okay, so to do that, we're gonna use the object, and then we're gonna use a method of this object set map. Okay, and we are gonna use the map object. So we're just specifying which map we are binding this object to. Now let's use the set directions method of this object. Okay, so we're displaying the route. So the method is sets directions, and it's going to take as a parameter the results. Okay, so let's save this, refresh our page, and let's click on the button. You can see our alerts message, and now we can see the routes. All right. In the next video, we are going to get introduced to geocoding using the Google Maps JavaScript API.